Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sunset TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. India and China held another round of diplomatic talks on Wednesday to review the situation at the line of actual control. For the first time since the border standoff began in 2020, India's top official in the Ministry of External Affairs dealing with China travelled to Beijing for the 26th meeting of the Working Mechanism for Consultation and Coordination on India-China Border Affairs. Now, this was the first in-person WMCC meeting since the 14th meeting held way back in July 2019. The last meeting of the WMCC took place in October 2022, just a month after the disengagement at the Gogra Hot Springs. But the border standoff remains unresolved. In fact, in December 2022, the Indian and Chinese troops had a face-off in Tawang sector of Arunachal Pradesh, further straining ties. So what does the latest round of diplomatic talks signify? What are the discussions that took place? And also, is there any significant outcome of the 26th meeting of the WMCC? All this and much more in this edition of Perspective. I'm pleased to welcome three distinguished panelists on the program. So let me begin by introducing them to you. Joining us is Mr. Shrikant Kondapalli, Professor, Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Professor, delighted to have you with us on the program today. Next to him is former Ambassador Suresh K. Goyal. Ambassador, thank you for your time. And joining us virtually is Major General A.K. Sivach, retired. He's a defense expert, as you all know. General Sivach, thank you very much for your time. Welcome to the program. Professor Kondapalli, as always, let me begin the program today with you. Let's first try and understand and help put into perspective the context of the significance of this meeting, because it's being portrayed as the first one, and that's why it's very important since July 2019. What do you think is the thought behind the first physical meeting of the WMCC? Do you see a significant takeaway in terms of the outcome?
While explicitly there is no takeaway, but this meeting is important because this is the first in-person meeting, number one. Second, since we are not heading anywhere on the Galwan aftermath, except for Pankung So after the Kailash ranges have been vacated, the Chinese have vacated and went back up to Sirijap from finger point 3 to finger point 8 and beyond. Also destroying what they have constructed at that point of time in 2020. So there is a feeling that we need to move forward, and there are also a lot of other external things that are coming up, which includes the Ukrainian developments. If the situation worsens in terms of the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, there is the possibility of China and India, which are currently marginalized, will be one of the areas. The second is Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang is supposed to come for the G20 foreign ministerial meeting on March 1st and 2nd. So generally, for the niceties to grow, they have these meetings, preliminary meetings. So I do not think the WMCC is only a standalone, but there is some communication, back channel communication that is, processed during this visit. So it's not just about the border, but also about the bilateral relations. Since we took a position that unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, we will not explore the other bilateral relations. So this is necessary for them to have a back channel discussion on where the current relations are. If you remember, Wang Yi visited India in March last year, but after going to Islamabad and attending the OIC meeting on Kashmir, so it did really vitiate the bilateral relations. So from that point of view, I think there is now a necessity to get back and discuss the bilateral relations. There is also the SCO meeting for preparations for which has to be conducted. Somewhere in September, the meetings are, so it's just about 6 months. So there are things that need to be made.
Lots of things that are set to happen, the G20, the SCO, as you said. So we'll come back and understand whether it reflects that change of stance on part of China also. India, of course, Ambassador, has always been willing to resolve issues through talks, and the communication channels from India's side have always been open. But the fact that this one is especially important and especially significant because it's the first in person, as Professor also explained. Apart from that, do you see any positive outcome towards making a headway in improving our relations with China?
I recall, I think several years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, Minister Jaishankar then was the Foreign Secretary, and he had the same kind of clarity of thought and the clarity of speech, and he missed no words even at that time to convey what we wanted to convey. And it was in the context of BRI when China was pressing us, practically pestering us to join OBOR, and then Foreign Secretary Jaishankar said, it is not clear as to what Chinese intentions are while they are implementing the BRI. And till we know what BRI is all about, we cannot join it. I was hoping, and I hope, that we have the same kind of demand for clarity in the talks now, and we do not have that clarity till now. That is just as an aside, number one. Number two, I think the talks have become a kind of necessity even without outcome. Because I don't know about China, but certainly for India, I can say that we do need to maintain a kind of environment, atmospheric, or what you call, just basically a vision of carrying on the talks, trying to improve relationships, peace and tranquility at the border, even if the Chinese keep on coming in that area between the two perceptions of the LAC and keep developing infrastructure, keep developing housing and everything. We do want to maintain a certain kind of normalcy and convey a signal that the talks are on, and we hope to be able to resolve the matter sometime in future. When that future will come, nobody knows.
So should we expect that, in terms of, and now that the meeting has ended, there are statements from both sides, should we expect some kind of optimism as far as resolving the current stalemate is concerned?
But definitely, lots of optics. I'm sure there will be statements of good wishes. I'm sure there will be statements of how we are trying to carry on the talks further. But till we know what Chinese want, till Chinese give a clear signal of what they have in mind, I think the talks are going to go on in time, but we will not know where we are going to end.
Okay, General Siwaj, what is in the Chinese mind is something that you can tell us, because looking at statements from both sides, the Chinese statement does not, mention the word disengagement. And that is a key word for India, because until disengagement happens, until there is peace and tranquility, India has made its position very clear that the bilateral relationship is not going to, progress further. So if the Chinese are not keen on disengaging, what really does it say about their mindset?
You're very correct. Tina, see, one thing is very clear. As far as Ladakh is concerned, there are 4 subsectors. One is north and south of Pangangso. The second was Gogra Hot Spring. Third was Dapsang. And fourth was Damchok. Now, as far as the 2 subsectors are concerned, the disengagement has by and large been completed. That is north and south of Pangangso as well as Gogra Hot Spring. But nothing much has gone in Dapsang, especially, and also in Damchok. Now, the point is that in Dapsang, are we thinking that there will be some sort of progress from the Chinese side? To me, it looks like not exactly. Reason is very simple. In Dapsang, it gives them a strategic advantage of where they are. They can directly address Nubra Valley and Saichen Glacier, bypassing the Daulat Beg Old. And this is the sector where there can be collusion between China and Pakistan. The China from east, from Saichen, and Pakistan from west, from Gilgit-Baltistan, can sandwich Nubra Valley and Saichen Glacier, and they can cut it off from the rest of Ladakh. At the same time, this area is strategically very important to us also, because from DBO, we can interdict their basically Karakoram Highway, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and also their western highway from Xinjiang to Lhasa. So having said so, that since this area is so important and the Chinese are not allowing our patrol to go to a traditional patrolling point, to me it looks like that is a hard nut to crack. The solution of this will not come so easily. And there is also a problem of charting Nala in Damchok, but that I don't think is so difficult. So having said so, I will say this, as far as Chinese are concerned, they are making no effort to resolve the issue. They are building up their infrastructure at a very fast pace. They have built up about 2,500 to 3,000 villages. They are making now a railway line parallel to the highway. They are also made 2 bridges on Pangangso. They have also trying to be very aggressive toward the eastern border, eastern sector, that is Arunachal Pradesh. Everyone knows what happened on 9th December when they came in Yangtze. So overall, I can say the Chinese are very aggressive. Chinese are building up their infrastructure.
But at the same time, you're right, General. India is also unrelenting, and that could be gauged from the fact we all heard Dr. S. Jaishankar's interview about how the Indian security forces are also looking in the eye to the Chinese troops, and we are not going to get back until our demands are met. But at the same time, recently there was a report from the Superintendent of Police in Ladakh. And that report mentions that India has perhaps lost access to about 26 of the 65 patrolling stations. Now, how concerning is it? At a time when we want things to move forward, this is a very, very good indication, the WMCC meeting that happened, the first physical one, that maybe, that stalemate could end. We could be looking at a significant breakthrough. But if this is the ground reality, how concerning is it? And especially from the point of view of the security forces?
To me, Tina, it doesn't look like that they are having a complete picture of the area. It is only the army and the ITBP know. The police do not have that sort of knowledge. They should not get away this idea that we are not aggressive.
Okay.
Our infrastructure is also improving at a very fast pace. We have built up roads, we have built up bridges, tunnels, logistic supply depot. So therefore, saying that we have lost certain areas in last 2-3 years may not be correct. The issue today is we know what is the intent of the Chinese, because their protocol agreement, they are not ready to follow it. But India is changed now. In last about 7 to 8 years, especially last 3 years, the infrastructure we have created on line of actual control is state of art. And we as an army has, experience of staying in a high altitude in this rarefied environment vis-a-vis Chinese. So I am not at all in agreement that we have lost some area that side. We are in control of everything. But what we lost in 2013, 2014, that is very difficult to get it back. But as on today, we are equally aggressive. And you remember what we did on 29th, 30th August of 2020. We took the Kailas range, and the Kailas range dominated Chashul, Maldo Baul, and the Spangur Gap was under our control from where Chinese came to in Ladakh in 1962. That is a different thing that we gave back Kailas range. I am of the opinion we should not have given in the first phase, but having said so, you need to give it and take it something. So Indians are very well prepared. Indians infrastructure is coming at very fast pace. Remember now the connectivity in Ladakh will be 24/7 in all weather. Once this Sinkunla pass will also come, that will be basically from Darcha, Padam, Nimmu and Leh. So my point of telling is that the report with the police has sent it. I am not in agreement with this. It is not of a ground reality.
Okay,
they are unaware of the ground reality. It is only known by Indian Army and ITBP. We are very well off and no area has been lost, and we are controlling this area very well. Our infrastructure is improving at a very fast pace. And remember, in next 5 to 7 years, our infrastructure will be as good as the Chinese, especially in Ladakh and central sector. In eastern sector, it will still take a time, because earlier we have not developed eastern sector, that is our Arunachal Pradesh, thinking that Chinese will come. But the mindset has changed in the last 15-20 years. Things have changed drastically. So
but you're right, General. But taking on from what you said, the kind of complex relationship, Ambassador, that we have with China, and it has been continuing for the last several decades, it gives a feeling that with China, nothing can be agreed until everything is agreed, until you delineate the LAC. This is bound to keep happening, and this is going to impact bilateral ties. So one step forward, 2 steps back is the kind of scenario that we've been witnessing. Now, the fact that India is taking its G20 presidency very seriously, we want to capitalize on this opportunity. Is it something that India, do you see it as an initiative of India? Because we want China to participate in making our G20 presidency more inclusive, wherein we are looking at global problems also. Or do you see China actually, on the other hand, using it as an opportunity to put pressure, some kind of pressure on India? What is, how do you gauge the situation?
From the way the crisis, if I can call it a crisis of faith between 2 largest neighbors in Asia, has developed over the last 4 or 5 years, and maybe there were signals, in fact, even before that. I don't think, personally speaking, that China attaches any great importance to assuaging the sensitivities of India on the matter of not military matters. Military matters, I think, and I completely agree with General Sivaj that our military at the moment is in a position to be equally aggressive as the Chinese, as the PLA is. But it is not a question of military balance or military matters anymore. It's a question of strategic and political equations.
Right.
And in those terms, I don't think China is particularly sensitive to what our concerns are, both strategically as well as politically. And therefore, I think there were certain years, for example, 1988, when Rajiv Gandhi visited China, Deng Xiaoping did want very good relations with India. It was clear in the atmospherics, it was clear in the optics. Again, by the end of 2000, when India had become a kind of an economic growing power, which it is still is, but that time the growth was 10% or something. China did think that yes, India is a country with which they should have good relations. But otherwise, at the moment, I don't think China is attaching any great importance. If I talk about G20, for me, I think China's very first priority, top priority would be, considering that China is trying to become a superpower in the world, not just Asia, would be how to handle Ukraine. Ukraine will be the top priority, and therefore the conversations on the margins of G20 will be Ukraine, where the important players are USA, Russia, of course, and European Union. India will be an important player because it is taking place in India. But I think India will have to play its cards very, very adroitly, very, very cleverly to be able to maintain a role there. China will pay attention to India as a host, as a country with some good relations with Russia, but Russia also is rather wary at the moment. So let us see how it plays out.
Professor, how do you look at the situation? Of course, for India, G20 presidency is extremely important. But how do the Chinese officials and those especially involved with planning and policy measures in relations to India, how are they perceiving India looking at its presidency, the seriousness that it is attaching, and is that one step towards either being involved and not being left out in the manner in which India is taking along everyone together? We hosted the Voice of Global South Summit. We are committed to finding solutions to all of the global problems, at least some in this period that we hold the G20 presidency. So what could be the Chinese thought behind actually now agreeing to engage with India and look towards a possible breakthrough?
Well, two things from a WMCC and India-China relations related matters. One, from a WMCC meeting perspective, I think they just want to talk. There is a Chinese, saying in 1930s and 40s. Mao Zedong used to say, "Tan tan tan, ta ta ta." Basically, what does that mean is, "Tan" means talk, 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 talk. "Ta" means beat up or prepare for war. So while preparing for war, while preparing militarily, paint a picture that you are still talking. So WMCC is, from a Chinese perspective, prepare for war or war-like situation, like what you mentioned, December 9th situation in Tawang on the Yangtze. So prepare for war, prepare all the military, whatever, and as General mentioned, the infrastructure that they are developing on their side, railways, roadways, fiber optics, and so on. So prepare for war, but give a picture that you are still talking. Without much essence to it. So the statement that was released doesn't have much meat in it. It is just about the 18th Corps Commander level meeting that has to be held, etc., etc. But they're also in a difficult situation because of the balloon, blowing up and the decoupling process. So, they also have another concept called "do not attack in all directions." Meaning, if you make enemies of everybody, then it is difficult for the Chinese Communist Party to survive. Again, a Mao Zedong, impact on the foreign policy. So what that means is, while decoupling process is going on, do not allow India to go too close to the United States. So keep talking again so that you suggest to some lollipops to New Delhi, where New Delhi thinks that, oh, so there must be some Chinese proposals, concrete proposals coming up during Qin Kang's visit or during the G20 or on the G20 per se. Obviously, Chinese President Xi Jinping would be visiting for these two summit meetings. And obviously, there will be, unlike Samarkand meeting of the SCO or the Bali meeting, there will be something concrete here, as we are entering into an uncharted course on Ukraine after President Biden's visit and President Putin's speech, which are both aggressive in nature, in the sense of giving it back to each other. In the light of this, and if there is an escalation to a nuclear domain, India and China would obviously suffer from nuclear radiation if there is any of that fireworks. But most important for the Chinese, G20 is important because that would have resurrected their economy. G20 is mainly on economic issues. Of course, last two summits has been on political, on Ukrainian or other issues which have impacted on the G20. In the light of this, there would be more focus on the economic regeneration. Chinese are suffering because last year they have a 3% growth rate, and this year about 5% is what is expected, which means that if the war continues, Ukrainian war continues, China would be pitched against the NATO, in which the Chinese have huge economic interests with the NATO. The combined trade with NATO countries is nearly $3 trillion, and the G7, the industrialized West. So the Chinese will have to make a choice between $3 trillion losing or $120 billion trade that they have with Russia losing. So obviously, the $3 trillion is more tempting than the $120 billion of, and of course, the multipolarity strategic partnership with Russia and all sorts of things. So at G20, their focus would be mainly in economic growth rates and how they repackage the whole G20 process in terms of globalization, in terms of how they can utilize these. G20, for an Indian perspective, is mostly on FDI. For the Chinese, it is about trade. And so for the past 20 years, that's been the focus of the two countries.
So that's precisely the Chinese thought. I'll come to you, Ambassador, for the Indian thought and to understand what's the way ahead. But before that, General Siwaj, I'll take one question from you. So majorly, we see no major outcome, as our panelists have suggested from the WMCC meeting. It's largely about, posturing and the kind of message that you send out that we are actually engaging in talks and we are making efforts to, achieve a breakthrough. The fact that, both sides have agreed to precisely prepone the senior commanders level meeting. So that could actually happen at an early date. Again, no significant outcome is something that we should expect, or could there be some movement at least on disengagement from some of the critical friction points? What is your hope?
Tina, I suppose this was more of an optics because this was a requirement by both the countries that there should be a physical meeting. The reason is simple, that we are now going to be a president of G20 and also SCO. Both meetings are going to take place in India. One is in July, one is in September. We want the China to come. We want this, both meetings should be successful. And hence, we deliberately went to Beijing. And as far as China is concerned, China is also very keen. They don't want to remain isolated in the world. They want to now have friends in the world. They want the economy to develop. And I fully agree that as on today, the point coming is China helping Russia? Is China giving weapon to Russia? Of course not, because China knows that if they give weapon to Russia, the economic sanction will be put by the Europe and by the America. And very rightly, the trade is more than $3 trillion. They don't want to lose. So therefore, this is a posturing that both the countries want to show to each other that we are there to move forward. As far as on ground is concerned, disengagement, there are 17 Corps Commander meeting taking place, 18 will be there. There may be some forward movement, possibly in Damchok, and that will be a step in the right direction. But we must keep on talking. Once you are talking, then you reach to some sort of sort of agreement.
You're right.
But
I think the
today,
good thing
why
that is happening is that we are engaging in talks both at diplomatic levels, at the military levels. Whether there is any significant breakthrough is something that we've been waiting for the last several years. But Ambassador, each time I talk about India-China relations, I am reminded of what the Prime Minister had said at the Shangri-La dialogue, that, it is the decade of Asia, and if the two Asian giants work together, we are going to write a different growth story. That, of course, has not happened given the current situation that both neighbors are in. The question to you is this going to continue the way it is? Do you see diplomatically, militarily, or at the political level something happening which can, be a way out of this troubled relationship that India and China have?
Tina, I can answer this question in two manners. One is a very simple manner. What is the ambition of China? China's ambition is simply to become the global superpower. And for that ambition, the country in the way at the moment, the country which it is contesting is China. Sorry, the USA. All right? Therefore,
and India doesn't fit in the scheme of things.
No, I'm coming to that part. So, therefore, obviously, USA is a country they have to give contest. Being in Asia, China earlier was able to live with India as an emerging, growing economic power because there was a common target, the Europe West, which they had to challenge for the economic supremacy, and therefore China and India cooperated in WTO on the climate changes and everything. Now, where is the incentive for China to work with India? Because if China were to work with India in Asia, you are actually encouraging another power center to emerge. Why would China want that to happen? And that to a power center which is actively working with the USA in India Pacific. So I don't see any possibility of China working with India or China trying to resolve as a political. It's not a military matter anymore, but China trying to resolve the political contest with India anytime in the near future. That's a short answer.
So that having been said, we'll have to wind up the program. That gives us a clear-cut explanation of what the India-China relations will continue to be in the times to come as well. Time allows me to take up only that much on the program today. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And thank you to you, viewers, for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sunset TV.